Aaron Harberts, executive producer. Gretchen Berg, executive producer. Heather Clinton, executive producer. Commander Michael Burnham, Sonequa Martin Green. Lieutenant Saru, Doug Jones. The Klingon warrior Laurel, Mary Chico. James Frayne plays Sarek. And Wilson Cruz plays Dr. Hugh Culver. And Anthony Rapp is going to be joining us in a few minutes. I believe that he is stuck in Dallas. Something like that. But we'll save him a foam.
I got it. I'll hold on to it.
Thanks. All right, so Alex, I'm going to trouble you for 1 second. We are recording this for a podcast, also for Variety. So can you explain in like 3 sentences, because people in their cars need context. What did we just watch?
Okay, so Harry Mudd was a character established in the original series, and we wanted to do an homage to both him and to a lot of what the original series did, which is play around with things like time loops and some of the great science fiction ideas. And this is episode 7, halfway through the season. So at this point in our series, our crew is still really beginning to know each other and understand each other. And Burnham is beginning to find her way from a very complicated upbringing that involved being a human on Vulcan, the only human race on Vulcan, and never having really had a relationship with anybody, starting to fall for Ash Tyler. And so she now is beginning to open up to the idea of love. And I think in the tradition of the best Star Trek episodes, the plot and the character stories mirror each other. So the time loop allows her to really explore who she is and open up a new side of her.
Sonequa, what was your reaction when you saw the script for the first time and you saw the word space whale?
It was amazing. We love what we see in the scripts. We have lots of affectionate titles for we say space talk, we say techno babble. You know, we really love it. What I loved about it is that even though it's something quite unfamiliar, the idea of a space whale, right? Being a xenoanthropologist, as Michael Burnham, I'm completely fascinated with what we would typically consider other. And so it was quite incredible the way the script was written and directed, that, you know, I very much was able to see myself in this space whale, you know, being all alone, which is, you know, I say to someone on the ship, I say, you know, even though we don't know what she is or what she's doing here, she is all alone. And so I think that's when things are the most powerful, when characters can see themselves in anything, right?
For Alex and Gretchen and Aaron and also Heather, can you walk us through the creation of this episode, the decision to do a sort of self-contained episode with Mudd, and then also, like, going back further than that, the decision to incorporate Harry Mudd, who's in a couple episodes this season, and to have Rainn Wilson play the character?
Well, Rainn had come in to meet on a couple of other parts early on. And it just clicked suddenly when the idea came up that, you know, we might want to bring Harry Mudd in. It just was like, well, that part is made for Rainn Wilson. And thank God it was available. What was interesting to us about the character of Harry Mudd is he's known in TOS as this beaten down, henpecked, if you will, husband to Stella. And we actually wanted to, what's fun about where we're at in the timeline is we get to show perhaps how that began, how he found his way into that context. So that was great. In terms of the time loop, we were desperate to save money.
Yeah, always starts
I'm not
out.
going to lie.
Yeah, always starts out. And so, a lesson to those beginning, in the middle, or at the end of your career in Hollywood. When you set out to save money, you usually spend more than you thought you would. But also in the time, this was a season about war, and every episode has an element of hope to it, and our characters always bring who they are, and there's humor in all of our characters. In every episode, when Jesse and Aaron knew that they were doing episode 7, and we knew we were right in the middle of the run, their idea was like, we gotta do something fun, we gotta do something big, we just have to sort of like do a little uptick of just kick up the tone a little bit or do something a little different. And that was the idea from the beginning, and it was the right time to do something like this. And it was ambitious from the start. It was ambitious. The script was one of those things, it was a labor of love that very much what's going on the ship with you guys as characters went on set with the actors and crew, and went on with the writers and producers as well, because it was like an ocean. I was going to say Ocean's 11, but whatever. Is it 9 now? 8. Ocean's 8 now. Where you're starting with these a perfect plan. It's airtight, and in the middle of it, things sort of get bumpy. But we all came together, and it's up there. I mean, we're all really proud of this episode. It was a bonding experience for all of us.
Heather, the character of Mutt sort of opens up this kind of bigger issue when you're creating a new iteration of Star Trek. How much of it did you want to be main service to previous treks, and how much of it did you want it to be its own thing that was independent of that?
Well, a big part of the show, and everyone in front of the camera and behind the camera, is such a combination of people who were obsessed Trek fans to people who sort of liked it to people who barely knew it at all. And so we talked from the beginning, and still do, about the importance of it has to be true to fans, but it has to open the door to people who didn't know it before. Because especially since prior to now, it's been a show and movies that appeal to an audience that has grown in age, and how do we bring in younger people who haven't seen it before? And that's what's been so great about this show. Especially a lot of us have kids who are of the age who can be watching it and being exposed to and brought into that tent. So it's always come from a place of respecting and loving the canon of Trek, but how do we open it up to new people?
And Alex, you've been involved in the Star Trek world for a while now. When you're putting this together, particularly when it comes to design and the effects that we see and the props that we see, how much of that, how much attention has to go into making sure that you're paying respect to those things of the past?
An enormous amount of detail, and there's a whole police squad of people who are really on top of making sure that the colors are consistent with canon and the design is consistent with canon, and we're always asking ourselves, okay, we know what a phaser looks like, but we want to make it new, but we can't make it too new because it's actually pre-TOS, so what can we do to give you both something fresh but also stay consistent with what you know? And that's a daily conversation, really, on every front, because it doesn't just apply to the props and to the look of the film, to the look of the show. But I think that the films taught me a lot about how to attempt to walk that line, where you're, as Heather said, trying to please fans, but also bringing in new audiences, because that's how Star Trek has remained what it is for over 50 years. And for me personally, I think the line between television and film is completely blurred now. And we endeavor every week to try and make it a movie. Certainly that's been our goal this year, so hopefully we can continue to do that.
Sonequa, you are playing the lead in this. Can you talk about just how you came to the show and what your response was when you were first cast as Michael?
I found out about the show. I found out that it was coming back to TV, number one, and so that was huge. And then I found out it was going to be digitally streamed, which was really huge. And then I found out that they were looking for a black woman to be at the helm, and I was like, what? And so I was really blown away by that. And I was finishing up my last few episodes of Walking Dead when I found out about this, and so that, you know, we went forward, and, you know, we all had such a great camaraderie from the very beginning, and then there were just like some slight sort of scheduling issues at the outset, and all of those worked out and everything. I really considered it to be a divine experience, the way it all happened. It all just seamlessly fell into place, and it was incredible. And I actually have it recorded. My husband recorded. We were in Buenos Aires when we found out that it was a definite go. And my reaction is recorded, and obviously there were tears, and you know, it was such an incredible moment. It felt revolutionary, and a deep honor and a blessing. And so there was certainly the time where I stayed in the freak out phase for a while, and then and then I had to sort of come down and center and focus at the task at hand, and start digging into the story. Because you can't stay in that freaked out place. You can't get anything done there. So, but you know what I'm saying? But I stayed there as long as I could, and then I got out and I got to work.
You guys, anybody ever watch Sesame Street? And you know how like when the Muppets would freak out, the camera would be steady and they go. That was the video that we got from City.
With my mouth wide open that I sent to you. It was, you know, it was amazing. And then even knowing then what little bit I knew about the people I was going to be working with, about the producing team and the cast and the crew, you know, I was floored by it all, and it has all exceeded my expectations, and they were extremely high. And it's exceeded my imagination even, and it's just such, I know we say it and we sound like, I hope we don't sound like broken records, but it just really is a phenomenal group of people across the board, our entire company, and you know, that's the big thing, is being able to do what we're doing, that, you know, we so deeply believe in it, and being able to do it together. It's just, you know.
Burnham's arc over the first season is a roller coaster. She goes from first officer to mutineer to surrogate daughter of an evil emperor in an alternate reality. So how do you navigate that? And how much did you know going in as far as where she would go?
Well, I knew a general overview, but of course specifics come as they come. And you know, we knew the sort of overarching vision of Burnham. And there's so many things that I love about it. I could talk, you know, for days, weeks, months. I think we all could about what we've been given. But what I love about it is that you see, speaking of revolutionary moments, there are so many revolutionary moments in Burnham's life in season 1. And you know, to go from someone who believed that they were always right? Being raised on Vulcan as a human. Believing that logic is supreme makes you think you're always right? And so what I found, what I discovered about myself as Burnham is that I don't know everything, and I am not always right. And just because I was raised with this, you know, deep understanding and almost obsession of logic because of this one, because of my dad, Sarah, right? It doesn't mean that I am the only voice that should be heard, and I was broken down to the depths, and realized that I was actually allowing my emotions, because they're inevitable as a human being, my emotions to fuel my logic, and it was creating kind of a disastrous situation. And I you know, broke down, lost everything, and then had to come back to myself and realize that the journey is actually to humanity, and not to this sort of idea of perfection. And that's why I love, you know, this episode so much as well, because the episode just before it, I find out that Sarek has been lying to me my entire life, and all I've been doing is trying to gain his approval as Burnham. And so that's a really big moment of self-discovery, that actually I have to live for myself, and I have to find a way to really be unified in community, and realize that we have to create a true mastermind, which is when, you know, skill sets and intellects come together and that's what it's really about. And that speaks to the greater theme of Star Trek and what the legacy is. And we see that played out in all of our characters in this season in so many ways. This one over here. We see that realization and that recognition of our part in the whole. I mean, hence the title Discovery. So.
James, we see, we do not see you in this episode, sadly, but we do see, as Sonequa just said, Burnham kind of wrestling with the impact that Sarek has had on her recently. You're playing a character that is one of the few characters in the series we've seen before. How do you play a Vulcan?
So I would like all my questions to be answered by Sonequa.
Sonequa, how does James play a Vulcan?
Sorry.
How do you play a Vulcan?
Well, the whole Vulcan thing revolves around this idea that they don't have emotion, but as true Star Trek fans know, they contain emotion. And going back to watch the earlier Sarek performances, there was one that really struck me. It was right at the end. That was in the what do they call that series? The Next Generation. And Sarek has a kind of freak out with Picard, and it was just sort of mind-blowing to watch. It's like, oh, he has all that going on, and he just doesn't let it out. And that's kind of the code. So it's not like you don't feel anything. You feel it, and then you go like that. And so being British is an enormous advantage. And so all I had to do was sort of layer in some condescension and a little sort of patronizing, and basically I was going full Brit. This is not going to be published. I love the Queen. I love Meghan. I love all of you. But I just don't show it. I think that's a comprehensive answer.
Well put. Mary, we don't see Laurel in this episode either. Sadly.
We didn't see.
But she has such a big impact on this season, especially as we go further along. You're also playing the Klingon, which is sort of at the opposite end of the emotional spectrum from Vulcans. So, aside from the makeup and everything that goes into that, how do you prepare yourself to play someone who, kills and likes it?
Well, it's interesting in that same vein of feeling like, yes, maybe Klingons are more expressive of all of that going on, but I think I've talked about the fact that Laurel is a character that is almost the closest to me of a character I've played, because I don't have to hold back. I'm 6 feet tall, I have a big voice, I've been told my entire life I'm too intense, so this is an opportunity for me to kind of just be all of that. And it's so liberating, and I'm constantly telling all of these beautiful people how grateful I am to be just constantly challenged by these large character arcs, and the prosthetic obviously is like a huge part of that transformation, and looking at myself in the mirror, finding that voice, finding what that transfer was from actually speaking Klingon to a dialect, letting it be deep and resonant, letting her be large and strong, letting her be passionate and committed. And I think what's really fun about her arc in the first season is it's misconstrued by the Federation a little bit, and she's so alien, and I think a lot of her actions can be seen a certain way if you're judging her by human standards. And what's been so fun is to kind of not be afraid of that, and allowing her to be as full and big as she can be, and then finding ways in which by the end of the season she's starting to see how the humans aren't so bad, that she has the potential to learn and grow from
this incredible cast of characters and sees the way in which she can also maybe help bring something a little bit better to the world.
How do you learn to read lines in Klingon?
It's very fun. Well, we have a translator, Robin Stewart, who speaks it fluently. She dresses up as a Klingon in her free time. And she's also an amazing, awesome pilot, but she gets the script in English and she translates it. And then Rhea Nolan is our dialect coach, who is with us on set, and I will have a session with her. The text, you can purchase a Klingon dictionary if you so wish. And the text is pretty straightforward. It's just like some certain symbols are like a G and an H together, which is more of like as opposed to like the capital H, which is more of a you know. You learn those nuances. But I will say, I've reached the point where I can't speak it fluently, but when I see it on the page, I have a pretty good grasp of what it should sound like before I listen to a recording. Like Robin still sends us a recording of what it is. And we have this amazing system we've developed with back translations, so I get a word-for-word translation of what I'm saying. So for me, that was really important because I can't memorize arbitrary sounds. They're never going to stick in my head. It was, I go sentence by sentence, I break it down, subject, object, verb, all this sort of stuff, and then just keep running it over and over again. And by the time it's really in my brain, the whole kind of sentiment of it is very present in my body. So on a day when nerves go up or whatnot, and I'm covered in whatever, whatever it may be, I'm able to focus in on what's happening. And luckily, I've had incredible scene partners who are willing to rehearse outside of the day, because it's one of those things where you have to have a sense of what the other person's giving you, what they're saying. Yeah, I like speaking in English too, though.
Do you feel like you could perform Shakespeare in the original Klingon?
I'd love to give it a go. I do. I love Shakespeare and I love being a Klingon, so it seems like a pretty good. Tachbe, to be or not to be, right?
Mary, for you and Sonequa, without getting too spoilery, the way that this season ends is essentially with these two women who have been on opposite sides of something for the entire season coming together to end a war. So I wonder, when you saw that was going to be the resolution for this season, how did you feel about it, and how does that speak to sort of what your idea of Star Trek is?
Oh man, well, I think, we were involved in this really interesting, unique, powerful sort of love triangle. Yes. And so we had so many in-depth conversations about it, because here are these two women who, were on similar journeys as like I said before, a lot of the characters were, this journey of actualization and discovery of oneself and also of each other through the discovery of yourself. And so what was beautiful about Burnham and Laurel is that there were so many similarities between these two women, in these worlds, sort of overcompensating in a way, and trying to find themselves, like you said a moment ago, trying to find their voices. Also, going off of strict nurture, right? Being really, really affected by the environments they were raised in, and seeking to question that, and seeking to maybe even step outside of that. And there was a huge redemption story with Burnham in one, and what was realized is that forgiveness was that sort of key to the actualization, the self-forgiveness. It was certainly the forgiveness of searching and reaching for that forgiveness of others and that absolution, but also realizing the most important forgiveness was of myself. And so for me as Burnham, that was a really powerful tool in finding my voice, and in sort of righting my wrongs. And what I love also is that here you have these two women who seem like enemies, like you were saying, and realizing that there is no difference between us, which is very Star Trek. There is nothing different between us, and it's something that Chakuma says in episode 1. He says, I look at you and I see a mirror. I see myself reflected in you. and that's very much Star Trek. All existing things are one. You know, these really, really powerful truths that have kept Star Trek, you know, the endowment that it is. And so I love that we were able to tackle that in a very tangible kind of way. And there was a line that ultimately, unfortunately, had to be cut, but where I look to Laurel and Burnham says, you know, today she's not my enemy, which was really beautiful, and you know, we had such a wonderful time.
Yeah, I mean, I just adore Sonequa as a human, as it's pretty evident. I think she's a pretty all-around incredible person, and but it was really wonderful because I you know, as we're filming, we're not interacting until the very end, but we're there, we're on set, we're doing various things, we have a great mutual respect, and to kind of see their journeys moving towards each other. And it is that thing of like, as each episode comes, there's the specific moments where things start to flesh out, and you're like, oh, we're heading here. And of course, still the kind of culmination of it is so profound. And this idea of, there's this parallel that I love. Again, not too spoilery, but at the beginning with the tardigrade, Burnham's a xenoanthropologist. She's able to see this trapped creature that is aggressive because he's being irritated. And I found that was like a microcosm of the macrocosm of what she's ultimately able to do with the Klingons and with me, is to see, oh, wait, you were behaving that way because you were provoked, because you were afraid. You know, it's such a testament to her character. And I love that through heartbreak, we're able to achieve peace, that there's so many other ways to deal with heartbreak, and instead of lashing out irrationally, we come together and hold hands. And
lift each other up to find our voices together.
Yeah.
Like the G7 conference rooms. Sorry.
British.
Too serious.
I don't really have a question for Doug Jones. I just think he's really amazing. How do you do that? I mean, you do it in everything, and you just do it really, really well. How do you do that?
First of all, hi. Hi. I don't know how to answer that. I will say, in my career of spanning 30-some years, I have worn more latex than a cheap hooker. But the challenge is, when taking on a new character, is how do I make this one different than all the other ones played before this? Here's the tool I've been given by God himself, and how do I make it different this time? The makeup informs a lot of that. The story I'm plunked into, the characters I play off of, informs a lot of that. Saru, I was the funny-looking guy on the bridge, by the way, for those of you who don't know, I was all the guys up here. So, as a Kelpian, this is a new species to the world of Star Trek. And the fact it takes place 10 years before the original series, it's like, what happened to the Kelpians? So, we'll find out, I'm assuming you guys are. So, anywho, so a daunting task to take on a new species, and not just a new character. Isn't it? I try to say, costuming really came in key for this. The boots I've been given, you didn't really see them in this episode, are high-heeled, looks like a hoof boot. So I'm walking around on my tiptoes all day, which kind of throws my posture funny, and my hips go forward, and all of a sudden I'm walking like a supermodel, and it's like, that worked. So my first fitting with my boots was like, that's how Saru walks, right there. One little bit at a time. A lot of things, different things inform how this new character takes shape, and being put into a story. These writers, God bless all of you, have given me such a wide emotional range to play. It's not a one-dimensional, oh, that's the funny-looking guy on the bridge. They go so much deeper than that for me. And giving me this relationship with Michael Burnham, too, that's very brotherly, sisterly. You'll meet us at the beginning of season 1 as a bickering little pair that I'm the one who reminds her, you don't know everything. Okay. But I think as the season progresses, you'll see us come to terms with each other again and again and again, and this deep affection, deep respect is exposed as a real brother and sister would have. They bicker, but there's a love underneath it that don't you ever cross her or you have me to contend with. That kind of a thing.
The life that he imbues also, we all marvel at Doug, do we not, all day, every day? Because he is just able to imbue such life, I could cry, through the latex, through the rubber, through the contacts that cover all of his eyes. It's really incredible to see. And that journey of redemption that we were talking about and actualization and everything, it's so powerful what Saru goes through over the course of the season. And speaking of this relationship that Burnham and Saru have, it's that was the sort of first step of absolution came from Saru. And there's a beautiful moment that we share in episode 5 actually, and so it was just speaking of discovery of each other through the discovery of yourself. It was so big with the two of them, and with them finding their love for each other and finding the true sibling relationship of each other. And I just feel that it was really beautifully written. And I was so grateful for it as well. And I love when you can see these major themes being played out in everyone's story and in the collective story as well.
I also would love to give props to the makeup department. Neville Page is our designer who came up with my look and the Klingons, and then Neville Page, then Glenn Hetrick with his shop in the Alchemy Labs that they have formed together that facilitates making all of these pieces, sculpting, painting, forming, and then my makeup artist, who's the lead of the prosthetics department on Star Trek Discovery, James McKinnon. He's fantastic. He has quite a Star Trek legacy himself, too, having worked on several series and movies before with you now. So he is a master at putting all of this together on me on the day, and also on Mary. He's your lead makeup artist as well. Mary Chico.
An honor.
Yeah. So it takes a village to make another worldly creature, and so to take credit for it all ourselves would be a disservice to all the departments that come together.
They really, and they have such an incredible respect for our craft as the actor. I mean, it's a mutual thing because they understand that we are taking the extra mile to breathe that life, and it's such a symbiotic relationship. But I found on days where I'm particularly stressed making sure I got these lines in. He's more than willing to let Rhea Nolan come in and go over the Klingon with me, or if it's a fun day, we'll just be blasting 80s music. Like, it's whatever you need in that moment, and you do have such an intimate relationship with those people because they're constantly sticking things in your mouth.
Very intimate.
Yeah, but it's really, I feel so grateful that it's such an incredible team, because I would not be as comfortable to go where I went emotionally and in the work if I didn't feel supported.
I would add also that Jason Zimmerman and Ante, who are here, and the visual effects team are unbelievable. Particularly you see a lot of any show, particularly an effects-heavy show, you're always trying to figure out what you're doing practically versus what you're going to do in CG. And that Gormagander that you saw was halfway built as a big prosthetic thing. And I'm not going to lie, it was awful. And we looked at it, and these incredible actors shot it, and we looked at the footage and we went, wow, that's not going to work. Hey, Jason, can you just replace it in every single shot? And they came up with that, and they had no time. And that's the kind of thing that we do a lot, is we'll make last-minute changes in post and throw a huge amount to visual effects, and they always deliver. So they definitely deserve huge props.
Wilson Cruz.
Can I say thank you guys so much for coming this morning? Happy Pride to all of you. I'm having a moment. I'm an openly gay man of color, and I'm at a TV Academy of okay, I'm just saying. Anyway, going to say.
So you are, in addition to being half of the first openly gay couple in Star Trek, you are also half of the first couple to ever brush their teeth together in Star Trek.
Dental hygiene is important.
It is important.
Even in the future, take care of your gums. Make sure you floss.
What has that meant to you?
You know, and Anthony, I wish he was here. For Anthony and I to be playing two openly gay men, and to be two openly gay men playing these roles, and bringing to life an epic love story in which the gender of the love is less important than anything, has been life-altering. And when we talk about representation mattering, it has become clearer and clearer to me in the last year. I mean, just the other day, Friday, I got a note on Instagram from a young man in Europe who was a big fan of the show and said that Anthony and I helped inspire him to come out to his mother. And that his mother accepted and loved him completely, and that he thanked us for that inspiration. And for me, that's what it's about, right? In this moment that we are getting, that we get to help this generation imagine a future worth their while. That we get to express to them a future in which they are celebrated for their differences, not just tolerated. That our loves are equal in scope and in beauty, and to be part of that is life-altering. And I thank these people for allowing me to be a part of it, and I thank CBS for having two openly gay men play these roles, along with Alan Cumming, who's leading his own series. And we hope, yes. And we hope someday that the Academy will acknowledge an openly gay man for playing an openly gay role in a drama. That would be historic and amazing. And to be part of this crew is, and this cast, is sublime. And we count ourselves
Aaron and Gretchen, when you hear Wilson talk about that and tell that story, I mean, how do you guys feel about what you have contributed with this season to, Gene Roddenberry's legacy and the legacy of Star Trek?
I think when we talk about visibility, we have a responsibility at this point to go beyond visibility. That's not enough. And as a gay writer and person and human who has a partner, and we brush our teeth together every night, it was important to show the granular bits of just being in a relationship rather than laying one sexuality over it. And I think, to bring it back to this episode, you say, you have the big idea. Let's do a time loop episode. How cool. But when Gretchen and I sit down, we say, well, let's do a time loop episode, but what are we getting out of it? Like, what are the bigger pieces that are going to contribute to this giant tapestry that Gretchen and I feel very responsible for in terms of weaving a macro world, weaving a universe. And for Hugh and for Stamets, that's learning more about their relationship. The Caecilian opera, which is something that starts there and gets threaded through all the way through season 2. Little tiny things that make our characters feel alive, that just continue to build on who they are and who they will become. So I think the goal was to go beyond the sassy gay sidekick and move into a world where you've got a couple that feels like they have an interior life that's getting developed with each episode. So for me, that was the most important thing, was to just create a true reality. And you can write these characters and you don't have to be gay. It's not like I'm the person who sits down and says, let me tackle the Culber Stamets scenes. Anybody who's been in a relationship, or not even, anybody who has a view of what they'd like a relationship to be can write them. But the key is they have to be specific, and we have to understand who they are as people. And I think representation on so many levels, be it religious representation or racial or sexual orientation. It's got to go deeper than just, look, there's a gay person.
Right. And yeah. And for us, the way that this couple was discovered, right? First, we met them in their occupations on the ship, and then it was revealed that they were together. I loved that, that we were first officers of Starfleet who happened to be in a relationship, and to do it with my friend of over 20 years is overwhelming. And there was so little that we had to talk about. We didn't have to explain a lot to each other. We built this relationship on a foundation of mutual love and admiration for each other that already existed. So it was easy to fall in love with Anthony Rapp every day.
And I have to shout out our costume designer, Gusha Phillips, who is just a genius because she certainly made this one look like an action figure, right? Or he looks like an action figure anyway, but
because nobody wants to see the Michelin Man's blooming. You are welcome.
Yes.
These pets are for you.
All right, I think we've got time for a couple audience questions if folks want to line up on the microphones right here.